We're going to be talking about a public consultation which is taking place in Ennis next week on Monday, which is aimed at highlighting the real financial pressures faced by people living with disabilities. I'm Marie Flanagan, of course, the co-founder of Clare Leader Forum, which is hosting the event to gather input on what a cost of disability payment should look like. The findings will be submitted to government as part of ongoing calls to better recognise the extra costs faced by disabled people across Ireland. I spoke with Anne-Marie earlier and first asked her why next Monday's public consultation meeting is needed.
We're holding a public consultation to encourage as many disabled people in Clare to participate. It's on the 23rd, that's next Monday coming. And it's really important that disabled people have our voices heard. Often in the general public, when people are sitting home and they're invited to contribute to a consultation, people often have a sense of, sure, what have I to say? I wouldn't know what to say. So by coming together and by sharing ideas, we can put together a really strong proposal for what we believe should be a fair and equitable cost of disability. And the end of the consultation for individuals ends on the 7th of April. So we know there's 500 submissions made already. This is a really, really important time in history for disabled people, and I fundamentally believe it's a point in which government will demonstrate its commitment to creating, I suppose, more equity and support so that disabled people can live our lives.
Okay.
And recognise the cost of disability that's outside of our control. And that's...
Yeah, and can I ask you about that cost of disability, Anne-Marie? I mean, you're making calls for a dedicated cost of disability payment. What does the cost of disability actually mean in real everyday terms? And what should that payment look like in your view?
Yeah. Well, if I give you the example of Northern Ireland, that might help people. So in Northern Ireland, they have a disability living allowance, and that acknowledges two particular costs that disabled people have. One is transport and the other is support, independent living, PAs, care. People use different words. And then there's a measurement. So there are, it depends on the level of impairment or needs. And then it can be temporary or it can be permanent. So it's. I lived in the UK and I benefited from it, and it is a really inclusive cost of disability. And so, for example, again, just in Northern Ireland, we know that we'll say the cost of transport for disabled people is just astronomical. Just my own example, I drive a wheelchair accessible van to accommodate my wheelchair. And it costs about €80,000. And so, and in Ireland as well, with particular vehicles, the Irish government has a VRT, which other states doesn't have on top of that. So, the assistance is a genuine one. And the irony of the fact that, 70% of disabled people live in deprivation of poverty, and yet everything is specialised. I mean, and I can't stand that word special, because special means additional cost or exclusion generally in Ireland. So everything, like equipment, and as I said, transport. As we know, people have to pay huge bills for therapies, electricity, additional heat, charging equipment. Then people have specialised food. Some of it is covered, other parts aren't. Medication, and then to get to work. That if for those of us who are lucky to have personal assistance, it brings with it additional costs. And those who don't are always trying to maybe ask a best friend or a cousin, would you come to a concert with me? Would you? And so there's a double payment, and you have to live it to understand and realise what it means. So also in 2021, as we know, the government commissioned the Indicon cost of disability report, and it acknowledged back then it would cost around 450, 550 a week just to meet those needs. So, and also then the government acknowledged in the budget 24-25 with once-off payments. And we know the campaign we've been driving around to reintroduce the once-off payments, which came to approximately €1,400. So it's acknowledged internationally, nationally, it's evidenced. So the government have asked disabled people what we want and how we want it, and how much it should be and what it should cover.
Yeah, and it's stark, given what the everyday extra costs that you've highlighted for people, and I think maybe some people who aren't living with a disability may not fully understand those added costs. Mm-hmm. The current weekly disability payment is sitting just below the weekly wages of a part-time minimum wage worker. How do you feel the government can, if they are even trying to justify that, particularly in the current cost of living crisis?
Yeah, so I suppose there's 2 points there I'd like to make. First of all, for any disabled person who is not able to work, of course there should be a living allowance. That's a fact. However, because disabled people are seen as non-contributing in society, every commentary is attached to the disability allowance. Yes, there's a significant number of us either at work or we're parenting and not in receipt of something. So the cost of disability should have nothing to do with the disability allowance. The other thing is, as a consequence of these additional costs, it's forcing people out of work and to stay at home. And because people are afraid to lose the few benefits they have. So, you have people on either low income or disability allowance. Now, people can work part-time with the disability allowance, which is great. But what I've spoken to, I'd say hundreds of people, who always say they're going to stay below because they'll lose the rest of the disability allowance. That's a shocking indictment of how support is provided, that people choose to stay poor because, it risks losing important secondary benefits such as the medical card and other costs, maybe some support with rent. So they should be separate anyway, and it should be a general means test in those instances, not the medical card. The medical card should be non-means tested for a disabled person who has recognised needs on a weekly, daily basis. That should be a fundamental entitlement. But really, in terms of the cost of disability, we really want to separate it from any social welfare payments so that we get to identify those costs and have those costs met in some way, regardless of whether people are working or not, or regardless if somebody's parenting and they're not in receipt of an allowance. If someone's a partner and they're not in receipt of it, there's still a cost of disability. They're living their lives too. So it really, what we're hoping by coming together will really put a strong collective submission together that recognises the different experiences and spaces that disabled people find ourselves in, and that comes across strongly. And then we're really hoping the genuine intention of government is to provide us with finally a cost of disability that people can live with dignity and meet its obligations under the UNCRPD.
And I guess a really important aspect of the public consultation is, given I'm sure many disabled people can feel voiceless at times, that they themselves are at the centre of shaping this particular discussion, one that will have the most impact on them.
Exactly. So I suppose we're the Clare Leader Forum with the fantastic and allied support always of Clare PPN, and we're holding that consultation on Monday. We're asking people to arrive at around 10:30 so we can get ready to go before 11, and we'll have a 2-hour conversation, workshops. We'll gather the information, we'll put together the submission, then we'll ask people to supply their contact details so people can send that in their own right, because it will be their submission. It can be collective and individual. We really want the government to have as many submissions as possible to help them with their deliberations and to ensure that it is inclusive, it's egalitarian. We also are encouraging organisations where disabled people find themselves in day services to really organise transport and support people to come. And maybe if there's family members in a support role, come along with the individual and let's have a shared conversation. And also remember, disabled people come We're all different experiences, all different impairments. So if somebody has an acquired impairment and they're sitting there going, oh, that doesn't include me, come along, of course it does. And if somebody is maybe an older disabled person, come along. If somebody said, well, I didn't qualify for X, Y, and Z, I won't qualify for this. That's where we want the changes to be made so that people aren't boxed into a disability allowance or the primary medical card, or that, that we want to say to government that we want a cost of disability that recognises the cost of disability, inclusive of all impairments and all ages.
Just finally, Anne-Marie, how important do you think events like this public consultation, are in terms of the aspect of local engagement in driving national change?
You see, it's critical. So, like here in Clare, we have 4 TDs and a senator. We are their constituents. So the louder we are at Clare, then the stronger their advocacy for us is. But also, where our needs are met, and we can follow through and see our TDs representing us, and there's good collaboration there. And where our needs aren't addressed and met, we can shine a light on that. And we know there are particular points in the year, like elections, etc., where we can speak to that. And also, just often people forget that we are constituents. We vote and we have power. So by coming together, we show that power. And people who are shy or maybe aren't used to putting together, as I said, submissions, this is where they can get the support and ensure their voice is heard.
Okay, that is the Disabled People's Organisation, Clare Leader Forum. They're going to be hosting public consultation on the cost of disability next Monday, the 23rd of March. It'll take place at the Scout Hall in Clon Road Beg here in Ennis from 10:30am to 1 in the afternoon. And Marie Flanagan from Clare Leader Forum, thank you so much for chatting about that with us on Morning Focus.
Thank you.